What has this franchise come to? Hey there, guys. This is Cole. Welcome to my rant on the movie that killed this franchise. And as you can tell by the title of today's movie review, I'm going to be reviewing the 2014 action movie sequel, The Expendables 3, also known as the day that this franchise died. I absolutely hate this movie, but so anyways, what is the plot to Expendables 3 for those of you who actually care? Well, the plot of this movie is as follows. Years ago, Barney Ross co-founded the Expendables with Conrad Stonebanks, played by Mel Gibson. After Stonebanks became an arms dealer, Ross was forced to kill him, or so he thought. Now, Stonebanks is back, and he's on a mission to end the Expendables. Ross decides that the way to fight old blood is with new blood, so he assembles a team of younger, faster, more tech-savvy recruits. The battle topples Stonebanks becomes a clash of old-school methods versus high-tech expertise, and that's the crappy plot of this piece of garbage movie. And I mean, it's an Expendables movie, so you already know the cast. You got Barney Ross as Sylvester Stallone. You got Jason Statham as Lee Christmas. You got Jet Li as Yin Yang. You got Dolph Lundgren as Gunnar Jensen. You got Randy Couture as Tool Road. You got Terry Crews as Hail Caesar. You got Arnold Schwarzenegger as Trench. You got some new additions: Harrison Ford as Max Drummer, Wesley Snipes as the Doc, Mel Gibson as Stonebanks, Antonio Banderas as Galgo, Glenn Powell as Thorne, Kelsey Grammer as Bonaparte, and Victor Orez as Mars. Which, yeah, Mars is such a stupid name for a character. But anyways, when this movie was released on August 17th of 2014, it received negative reviews from critics and audiences, and many people who were fans of the first two Expendables movies were massively disappointed. And this movie was kind of screwed before it came out, because 3 weeks before the movie released, the movie was apparently leaked online, and it was also revealed that the movie was PG-13, which alienated a bunch of action movie fans, especially those who liked the first two movies, because the first two movies were rated R, and for this to go PG-13 really alienated a lot of people, and this movie underperformed at the box office because of it. Now, it wasn't necessarily a flop, but it was considered a box office disappointment because of where the expectations were. And as for my reaction to the movie, yeah, this movie is absolute crap, and it's the day that this franchise died, and I have not yet watched Expendables 4, which apparently somehow is even worse than this, but I'll find out when I watch it, and thank goodness it's free on Netflix at the moment. That way I don't have to rent it. But let's just get into the review of this terrible movie so I don't have to talk about it for too long. So for anyone who actually cares, this movie starts off with Barney Ross, played by Sylvester Stallone, Lee Christmas, played by Jason Statham, and Gunnar Jensen flying on a helicopter. And Gunnar starts shooting at the bad guys on a train. And I have to say, this is a terrible way to start the movie. And the reason that is because this movie is PG-13. It is way too tame for an Expendables movie, and the action scenes are boring and not exciting. I'm like, how do you make the action scenes in an Expendables movie boring? That is not a good thing for an Expendables movie. The first two Expendables movies were well liked by old school 80s and 90s action fans who grew up with those older movies. Not only because it had a lot of the iconic 1980s and 1990s action movie stars in them, it's also because of the fact that they were rated R and they had very exciting, explosive action scenes. And also, why is this movie 2 hours and 6 minutes long? Why? Now, do not get me wrong. There are plenty of movies over 2 hours that I enjoy. Like, the first Die Hard movie it's just slightly over 2 hours, you know. There's movies I enjoy that are over 2 hours, like the first Die Hard movie. Also Die Hard 3. I also enjoyed Terminator 2, The Fugitive, Air Force One, Catch Me If You Can, Goodfellas, A Time to a Kill. There's plenty of movies over the 2 hour mark that I like. Heck, I even like some movies that go for 3 hours or even slightly longer than that, like the Godfather trilogy, Scarface, and Lord of the Rings. But you want to know the difference with those movies? Those movies, despite being longer, were well paced. This is not. And as the saying goes, let's get back to this crap. But getting back to the train scene, Barney Ross says, get down, and Lee lowers the helicopter to the ground while still pursuing the train, and the train basically wire cuts bad guys in half. But because this movie is PG-13 and it's tame, we don't get to see any bloodshed, which is makes it a really crappy action scene with horrible CGI. Because once again, the PG-13 rating was a stupid idea. Anyways, they rescue a hostage who is played by Wesley Snipes, who is one of the only few things I liked about the movie, where he basically runs back into the train and he makes the train go full speed ahead and he shoots the machine gun in front. And once again, a lame, boring action scene. He moves away from the front and jumps to the helicopter Barney and his crew are in, and then the building explodes with absolute horrible CGI. Like, one of my big problems, the CGI is absolutely horrible in this movie. I mean, heck, I have seen made-for-TV movies that did not have effects this bad. I mean, heck, I've even seen PlayStation 2 video games that don't have effects this atrocious. And that's saying something. And even though, yes, I did like the Expendables 1 and 2, I will be the first to admit that the CGI was not the best. But at the very least, they were fun popcorn movies. And the first movie, and even the second to some extent, did have some practical effects. And yes, the CGI wasn't the best in the first two movies, but it looks a lot worse here. Like, they just doubled down on the really bad CGI. And the guy they rescued is Doc, played by Wesley Snipes. And Wesley Snipes, I do rather like as an actor. You know, whether it's movies like Demolition Man with him and Sylvester Stallone, which is much better than this. Whether it's Blade 1 and 2, New Jack City, Passenger 57, The Fan, Deadpool and Wolverine, Murder at 1600, and Boiling Point. See, I like Wesley Snipes as an actor, and he does try the best that he can with the material he's given, but even he can't save this abomination. Anyways, Tool Road, played by Randy Couture, decides to ask Doc why he was in jail, and this scene is garbage right here because it has a cringy reference. Because for those who don't know, back in the 2000s, Wesley Snipes went to jail for 3 years of tax evasion, and but Doc and basically Tool Road asked Randy, why were you in jail? And he said tax evasion, which, I'm sorry, that was a stupid joke and it was not funny at all. And that's another bad quality I have with this movie. The comedy sucks. And what's disappointing is because the first two movies had the perfect balance of both good action and good comedy. This movie does not have a good balance of either one of those. And I will say, even though some of the characters' dialogue is poorly written, which I blame the writing and the rating more than the actors, Wesley Snipes was a good new addition to the team, and I gotta say, he tries his absolute best with the garbage material he's given. He's one of the only few things that made this movie somewhat watchable. We then cut to Salima, where Hail Caesar is at with Barney and his recruits, who go to fight bad guys. And once again, the action scenes are boring with horrible CGI and they're very tame. And like I said, when the action scenes in an Expendables movie suck and are boring, you know you screwed up. And 18 minutes into the movie, we are introduced to the main villain of the movie, Stonebanks, who is played by Mel Gibson, who is honestly one of the only few good things about this train wreck of a movie. He is honestly what made this movie somewhat watchable whenever he was on screen, but when he was not on screen, the movie was boring and hard to get through. And Stonebanks shoots Hail Caesar from a helicopter, and the Expendables team jump in the water to avoid a bomb that's dropped on the ground, and there's a terrible CGI explosion. And then we see that Hail Caesar is injured, so Barney Ross decides to visit Hale in the hospital, unsure if Hale will make it, and he kind of like, not really a cross, but something kind of like it, that, well, at least what he views as somewhat like it. He basically decides to hand it to Hale as a gift, as a way to hope he makes it through, which is one of the few positives of the movie, because it does show that Barney Ross, you know, does care for his friend. Like, one of the few positives to this train wreck of a movie. And you can tell he cares for his friend. But anyways, 27 minutes into the movie, we're introduced to Max Drummer, played by Harrison Ford, who, like, is one of the few good things to the movie. And Barney Ross says, "I'm supposed to meet Mr. Church." And then Max Drummer says, "You were. I'm Operations Officer Max Drummer. You don't have to worry about Church anymore. He is out of the picture." And I know I'm going ahead, but the new members of the Expendables team, played by Antonio Banderas, Wesley Snipes, Harrison Ford, and Kelsey Grammer, are good. They're some of the few positives to the movie. Plus, the villain, played by Mel Gibson, is good too. But my main problem, my biggest problem with this movie is that Barney Ross, played by Sylvester Stallone, who was a great character into the two previous movies, is 30 minutes into the movie is turned into a very unlikable jerk, as he treats the team. He decides the team is too old and dangerous, so he decides to fire them, but then he replaces them with new, younger, inexperienced fighters with his reckless leadership, his abandonment of his longtime friends, and his cold, dismissive attitude towards the original team. And an example of this is when Barney Ross says, "Live your lives while you still can," to his team, and "Oh, it's too dangerous and they're old." Yet, the oldest member of the team making them is a huge hypocrite. Because Barney walks out of the bar and so does Lee. I mean, Lee Christmas is smart. He even decides to confront him about it. He basically yells at Barney Ross, "You think you could just pull the plug and that's it?" And then Barney Ross says, "Just did." And then Lee says, "Yeah, well, it doesn't work that way. We've been through the mud. I have saved you multiple times, more than I can count. You owe me a shot at this man who took Caesar down." And then Barney Ross says, "We're not doing that." And I hated that scene, because now I do not blame Sylvester Stallone for this. I blame the script he was given, but he basically says, "We're not doing that." And just the way that he said it came across as very scummy. And my biggest problem with the movie is the new younger members of the team, like Mars and Thorne. They suck, especially Thorne, played by Glenn Powell, who was terribly miscast in this movie. And another thing is that these new members, the new younger members, my main problem with these new younger members of the team is that they are bratty and very annoying. I mean, heck, even 48 minutes into the movie, Barney Ross tells his old team that he now has a younger team, and Gunner calls out Barney on his hypocrisy, but Barney, like an a-hole, is dismissive. And Mars says, And basically one of the very unlikable new recruits decides to disrespect the original team and says a bunch of has-beens trying to be hard towards Gunner and his friends, and in a very rude and condescending tone. And again, these new recruits are so unlikable after they disrespected the original team, and they are so disrespectful and rude, like you want to see these heroes get blasted away by the villain played by Mel Gibson. Like, they're so unlikable, they're very rude, they're unlikable, they're so rude and so annoying, you just want to beat them up. Like, that is how unlikable these new characters were. And 1 hour and 13 minutes into the movie, after Mel Gibson's bad guy Stonebanks kidnapped the new team, he's torturing them for information, and you are just rooting for the villain to win. And I gotta say, when your movie has me rooting for the villain instead of the heroes, then you know you screwed up big time. And then Barney Ross, played by Sylvester Stallone, says he's going to go alone to rescue his new team, and Trench calls him an idiot for deciding to go on his own, which he is correct. But then Galgo, who was introduced at the 40-minute mark of the movie, he decides to return, and he decides to go with Barney Ross. But the old Expendables team is standing in front of Barney's plane, and Barney says, "What are you doing here?" And then Lee Christmas says, "You were stupid enough to get yourself into this own mess. We're the only ones crazy to get you out of it." And Kelsey Grammer, who does play one of the new Expendables team members, he is a good actor. But again, he is barely given... And Antonio Banderas and Kelsey Grammer are good actors. But the problem is, they are barely given anything to do. So even though they are good in the movie, they're given barely anything to do. And the most of the focus is on these brand new bratty characters who I do not care about. And I gotta say, the final battle between Barney Ross and Sylvester Stallone and Mel Gibson is so underwhelming, which sucks because the final battle actually does start off promising, but the way that Stonebanks dies is very underwhelming. And also, another problem I have with this movie, we as the audience, we know for a fact that Barney Ross is not dead, but this movie has the stupid fake out death cliche where the whole team thinks that Barney is dead, but obviously he's not, and we see that he's hanging on the rope, basically on the ladder of the helicopter after a horrible CGI explosion cloud is behind him. And then we find out that Hail Caesar's alive, and the new team reunites, and just, yeah. This was a terrible movie. I really hate this movie, and I have no hope going into Expendables 4, which I've heard is supposed to be so much worse than this. But before I give my final score, do I have any positives for the movie? Okay. Even though I do feel like most of the new characters are not given much to do, I do feel like that Wesley Snipes, Harrison Ford, and Antonio Banderas and Kelsey Grammer, they do try the best with the material they're given, and they were good new members. I also do think that Stonebanks, played by Mel Gibson, is a good villain. And I guess my final positive is that the Expendables are willing to call out Barney on his hypocrisy, but other than that, the Expendables 3 is garbage. And another problem I have with the movie that I forgot to mention, remember how I said Barney Ross thought that Stonebanks died? Well, guess what? We as the audience, we never figure out how he survived. This movie gives us zero explanation on how we survived. So it's just, we're left as the audience wondering how that even happened, and we don't even get to know the answer in this piece of crap movie. And from what I understand, the fourth movie doesn't even answer that. So you could have cut him out of the movie and it wouldn't have made a difference. So yeah, screw this movie. I will never watch it again. And on a scale of 1 to 10, and overall, if you're a fan of the first two Expendables movies, do not bother with this one and just stick with the first two. But on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give the Expendables 3 a 3 out of 10. So yeah, Anyways, guys, that was my rant on Expendables 3. And next, I'll be watching Expendables 4 for the first time. I don't know about today, but I might need to wait a few days and save the energy to tear into that. But, yeah. Anyways, guys, later. And screw this movie.